Thank you for joining Pioneer. I'm Chris with Norman Public Library Central, and this is the fourth video in our series of videos on the Swift computer programming language. In our last video, we learned how to add up a series of numbers in an array. At the end of the video, I posed a challenge to you. I suggested that you add decimal places to the end of the numbers. Did you try it? Did you run into a problem? In today's video, I want to talk about debugging in Swift. That is the process of figuring out what's going wrong when your code doesn't work. Everyone makes mistakes in their computer programming, and as a beginner, it's particularly useful if you can have someone looking over your shoulder. Well, since I can't reach through your computer monitor and you're learning how to program from some guy on the internet, I need to show you how you can debug things yourself. So, let's take a look at the error that we generated as we added decimal places to our numbers. If we begin with our last example, we had 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in our array. If I add a decimal place to the 1 and make it 1.1, Swift will begin yelling at me. It says, binary operator plus equals cannot be applied to operands of type int and double. Up to this point, we haven't worried very much about the type of our data. But it turns out that Swift is what's called a strongly typed language. That means it cares very much about the exact type of the information that we're putting into it. Up to this point, when we've used the word number, we've meant numbers like 1 and 3 and 4,917, numbers that do not have decimal places. We call those integers. Well, we've now run into a second kind of number, a number with a decimal place that it turns out computers deal with very differently. Those numbers are called floating point numbers, and by default, Swift is going to create them as doubles. That's why our error says cannot be applied to operands of type int, which is short for integer, and double, which is a number that has a decimal place in it. Swift is confused about you using two different kinds of numbers here. Let's finish adding decimal places to the rest of our numbers. Now, all of the numbers in my sum numbers array have decimal places in them. But on line 3, sum of some numbers still doesn't have a decimal place. So even though it's 0, if I want to do math between sum of some numbers and the numbers in my array of numbers, I must also add a 0.0 to the end of some numbers. Once I have added that, the error goes away. So congratulations if you figured that out on your own, or even if you figured it out by asking the internet for the answer. That's a great way to solve computer programming challenges, and all computer programmers make heavy use of the internet when they are debugging their code. Let's take a look at some other common errors in the Swift programming language. For example, if you accidentally leave off your closed square bracket, Swift will give you an error that it expected closed square bracket in container literal expression. Well, we don't have to worry too much about what container literal expression means, but it does say expected closed square bracket. So I can see that I need my closed square bracket. If you accidentally leave out a comma, Swift will say expected comma separator. If you accidentally put one of your numbers in double quotes, remember we use double quotes to tell Swift that this thing is a word. Whoa. What does that mean? How do you even pronounce that word? Never mind. At any rate, it's telling me that I'm trying to do math with something that can't be done math with, and I have this array that contains multiple kinds of things, and it's very confused about that. So let's make sure that this array only contains one kind of thing, a double or a floating point number, and that it's a number so that Swift can do math with it. Another common error in Swift is when you are dealing with strings. Sometimes you accidentally leave off the closed double quote. Swift will yell at you and say unterminated string literal. So remember, you have to terminate your string literals, which has nothing to do with blowing them up or robots. Another common error in Swift is to mess up your curly braces. So for example, if I accidentally leave off the curly brace that begins my for loop, Swift will tell me very clearly expected curly brace to start the body of for each loop. It's also telling me I have an extraneous closed curly brace because my closed curly brace doesn't match any open curly brace elsewhere in my code. If I add my curly brace back in, now my braces match and both errors go away. This is very common in computer programming where sometimes you have one error causing many other errors. So when you're debugging, make sure you debug the first error in the list first, because later errors may just have been caused by that problem. That's especially true when you have a problem with your curly braces. Today's challenge is much easier than challenges in the past. Your challenge today is to make some mistakes. Go into your code, make your code work, and then break it. See what error messages you get. The biggest difference between an experienced computer programmer and a new computer programmer is experienced programmers have made way more mistakes than new computer programmers. And so we know what the error messages look like. Thanks for joining me, and have a great day.